So it's a couple minutes before 7, but we have to go with the crowd and everyone looks ready. So we're going to get started. Welcome everyone. I'm Shelley Hazer. I am the director of the Lifelong Learning Program here at Flagler College. And it is my pleasure to welcome everyone, and it's wonderful to see everyone's faces. A lot of familiar faces and new ones, so welcome if you're new. And before we get started, I did want to just have a little plug for our speaker, Bob Nawrocki. He is teaching a class for lifelong learning called St. Augustine Stories. So if you enjoyed tonight, his class starts Monday. There's a couple seats left. There will even be more stories. It's 4 Mondays, and you can pick up a flyer. They'll be right out at the table here. So is anyone taking that class with him Monday? Oh, a couple people. Wonderful. You can't say the same stories. All right.
I had a whole class taken care of.
So Megan Altus is going to come up and introduce our speaker tonight, and then we'll go ahead and get started.
Good evening, everybody. Before we get started, I want to also put a little plug in for the Historical Society. So I have a fun Halloween fact for everybody here tonight, and that is, as everybody knows, the legend of Sleepy Hollow, right? And probably half this room knows this fun fact. But Ichabod Crane was actually the name of a soldier that was stationed at the Castillo de San Marcos. It was Fort Marion at the time, and it was during the Second Seminole War. It was very long after he met Washington Irving in his youth, and apparently his name stuck. But here's a fun Halloween fact for you, and if you like that fun fact, if you join the St. Augustine Historical Society, we have hundreds of articles and blogs, these Florida Gazettes that you can read that are accessible to you in your very own home. So, but for tonight, we have a special speaker. Bob Nawrocki earned his Bachelor's of Art in History from Buffalo State College and his Master's degree in Library and Information Science, we've got fans, from the Catholic University of America. His career in records and information management includes positions at the Virginia State Library and the New Jersey State Archives, beginning with his first role at the York County, Pennsylvania Historical Society. Many of you know Bob at best, though, as the Chief Librarian at the St. Augustine Historical Society Research Library, a position he held from 2010 until earlier this year.
Yes, March.
He is a dear friend, and he is his engaging programs have earned him quite the following in his retirement. Please join me in welcoming Bob Nawrocki.
Great, thank you. One quick question. You still follow the bills?
Of course.
Broke my heart too many times. Especially the last 2 weeks. Okay, so Lost St. Augustine, what does that mean? We know where St. Augustine is, it's all around us. I got the inspiration for this talk from a show on PBS called Lost LA. The host, Nathan Masters, is a historian and archivist, and presented stories of Los Angeles history that were found in libraries and archives. And they were always very interesting. You know, so, well, you know, St. Augustine is 460 years old. We must have a couple of stories here someplace. And as Megan said, I had the privilege of spending 15 years at the Historical Society's Research Library, and I discovered many hidden and unusual bits of history while I was there. History is all about stories. As Nathan Masters said, it's more than just names and dates. When we were in school, we all remember names and dates, but it's really about the stories. Stories of people, places, events, buildings that have made up St. Augustine's rich and vibrant history. None of these stories are weird, they're just forgotten. And these stories can be found in a photograph, a letter, or a newspaper article. The hard part comes when you're trying to track down the whole story, as we'll find out. It's tough to find all of them. Too often we find tantalizing clues, but not the entire story. When someone mentions Pedro Menendez de Aviliz or Henry Flagler or Edmund Kirby Smith, most everyone knows who they are. Anybody who doesn't, in trouble. But if I mentioned Llewellyn Day McConnell, no? Frank Butler?
Yeah.
Okay, good. That's one. Congratulations. Miles Hancock. Oh. Charles Perry. Thomas F. House. Well, you'll hear about him today, as Mildred Berry and Albert Smith. Well, we all know Llewellyn Day McConnell developed the Fount of Youth. Frank Butler was a Lincolnville entrepreneur. And Miles Hancock was one of the first 7 people who's founded Lincolnville. And in October 20th, 1866, next week, my birthday, was the day that the city council allotted 7 lots along the Maria Sanchez Creek for the beginning of Lincolnville. So if you attend my next talk, we'll talk a little bit about that. And then also Charles Perry, interesting guy, he built a half-size steam locomotive in his backyard. What can I tell you about? Everybody's got to have a hobby. So the stories we're going to talk about tonight are the woman who made hats for horses, an outsider artist, folk artist, the remaining piece of a boarding house from the 1870s, buried treasure in Lincolnville, and potatoes, potatoes, and more potatoes. So let's get on. Okay, let's see if I can make this work here. Okay. So this story started a number of years ago when the son of Jerry and Mildred Berry stopped in at the library one day and dropped off a collection of photographs of horses wearing hats. His mother, Mildred, the wife of Jerry Berry, a photographer in St. Augustine, he was in fact, if I'm not mistaken, his shop was right across the street from the Historical Society Library on Aveley Street. His mother had spent 10 years creating hats for horses to wear in the annual Easter parade. He also dropped off a DVD, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. So here's a picture of Ms. Berry with one of her creations. The building behind her is Potter's Wax Museum. It was A1A Ale Works, and it goes on and on. I'm not sure what they're turning it into yet.
We're losing your voice there.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
You can take that microphone off.
Okay. I'm a walker, what can I say? So we'll just take a look at a couple more of these interesting hats. Okay. Okay, that's okay, we're good. I love this one. So, one interesting thing I found was I read a newspaper article, and they said that they would make the hats for the horses at night in their stalls, and they would play music so that when they went out on parade, they wouldn't get all upset and tear up the hats. Kind of wild. I mean, you know. Okay, so here is, I think this might be Major Arnett, I'm not positive, but this is an image of one of the carriage drivers with his horse. At one point, there were about 20 of these tourist carriages in town. And as I understand, all of the drivers were black, and they were formal wear as they carried tourists around town telling their stories. And I hope to do some research about these drivers sometime in the near future. They're a forgotten group of the tourist industry in St. Augustine. So here we have another driver and his horse. And we'll talk about technology I do not get along with. Okay, perfect. Hedda Hopper. Does anybody know who Hedda Hopper is? Of course. Great. Okay, I'm not the only one. Thank you. For those of a certain age, we're all that, you might remember a show called What's My Line? It was on Sunday nights, where a group of celebrities would try to guess what a person was doing, what their job was that was so unique. Ms. Berry was invited to go on the show. She got a trip up to New York. And while the panelists guessed that it had something to do with horses, they didn't know that she designed hats for horses. So she won the magnificent sum of $50, which is about $550 today. but it won attention of St. Augustine here in New York City. And here is, so Ed Hopper donated a hat, and Mrs. Berry also received donations of material from several costume designers, including, I think, from the Metropolitan Opera.
Wow.
So, wow, that's kind of cool. I hope the horses appreciate it. Okay, so here are some of the members of her committee wearing the horses' hats. Okay, kind of cool. Let's go on to the next one. So, by 1960, the Easter Parade would feature not only the horses with the hats on, but carriages that were decorated, excuse me. So here we have Mrs. Berry looking over some of the designs that they were going to put on one of the carriages. And here's the committee working on the topper. This would be put across the top as a carriage. And here's a flower basket that's going to be on top of the carriage. And here's, no, there's the flower basket. Okay, I was a little fast there. And here's a line of a couple carriages waiting to get into the parade. So it's sort of our own version of the Rose Parade. And this is the carriage that was sponsored by the oldest house. So I don't think they won. Let's see. The decoration of horses and carriages' main event on Easter slowly died out. Mrs. Berry moved to Jacksonville in the mid-60s, I think after her husband passed away. And she died in 1985. But her obituary mentioned she was the woman who put hats on St. Augustine's horses. And this is one of the great things about the Historical Society, is that so many people here in town, or even out of town, I think Mr. Jerry was from Georgia, they remember us and they donate things. They photograph albums, they photograph books, they photograph wonderful material. And we take that in, not we anymore, I'm retired. I'm a historian, which means I'm unemployed. But, you know, the Historical Society takes those in and we preserve those, we make them available. A lot of our material is available on the web, as Megan has said, and it's really kind of cool. So I think, you know, if you're not a member, please consider being a member, because we can't, it's really tough to save this material, how expensive it is. We really appreciate your help. Okay. Another horse, okay. I'm losing track of all my horses. Okay, buried treasure. Who'd have thunk it? We had buried treasure here at St. Augustine. While pirates visited St. Augustine a number of times, they were here to plunder, not to bury their treasure. But nevertheless, we do have one case of buried ecclesiastical treasure that was buried possibly to preserve it from the U.S. government, or maybe a thief grabbed it, stuck it in a hole, and forgot about it. I don't think I would have forgotten these pieces, but somebody did. So much of the story of these items is conjecture because we know so little about the whole story. So let's take a look at where the treasure was found. So this is a picture of the portion of the 1885 bird's eye map of St. Augustine, showing the Keith property, which is south of Kingsbury, where the buried items were found in 1879. In an article, Dr. Parker said they were found while a tree was being planted. I think it was, I've heard two stories. One, they were digging up a tree and they found it, and another one says they were digging a hole for a tree. The display, and some of these items are on display at the Nawrocki Museum, said the items were found when Oneida Street was being constructed. So there's our first question. Where did they find them? I drove out there. I can't find the house that's shown on the map. There's some empty space around, so who knows? So let's take a look at some of the items that were found. So this is a standing chalice type cup, which was made between around 1750 to 1800. This is a paten. For those of us who are Roman Catholic, we know that this is where the host resides during the Mass, sits on top of the chalice. This is called the ciborium, which is used to hold consecrated. Wait, I went too fast. Okay. This is a gilded silver chalice dating to around the 1600s. So all of these items would have come from Mexico, probably, because we didn't have gold, we didn't have silver, we didn't have all that material here. So they actually imported all of these items from Mexico. So here's a ciborium, which is used to hold consecrated hosts. It is made of several metals and includes a lid. This dates to around the 1700s. It might reside on the altar with extra hosts after the Mass, or it could be taken by the priest while traveling so he could distribute communion to the faithful. So here's another paten. Hard to believe I was an altar boy in my younger days. And we used to have to, back in those days, you would kneel at the altar and the priest would combine things. So we always had a paten with a handle on it. Of course, Bob, being Bob, would occasionally thunk somebody in the street. All the altar boys did that. Or they were drinking a terrible, terrible wine. But anyway, that's my story about patents. And that's probably why I'll spend a few extra years in purgatory. Here's another chalice made in Mexico City, probably in the 17th or 18th century. The rings around the cup were used to hold bells that would ring, because when I was an altar boy, the priest would raise the chalice, would ring the bells. And the wooden base was added later to replace the missing foot. But this is the finest piece that was found. I mean, that is just an amazing piece of work. It is a cross which would have been attached to a staff. And at processions in church or other religious events, it would have been preceded to clerics in procession. The cross was made for, or more likely commissioned, by Antonio de Benavides, and I apologize if I messed his name up, who served as Captain General of St. Augustine from 1717 to 1734, and was the 28th governor of La Florida. So now we come to the question, who buried him? We don't know. Well, we think we know, just we go back right here. So one idea is that after the transfer of Florida from Spanish control, and it became a U.S. territory, there was confusion about who owned the property of the Catholic Church. The district attorney of Florida at that time was of the opinion that the property of the Catholic Church was the property of the Crown and should therefore be transferred to the U.S. government. So not only, there was always a lot of little property around, so everybody wants to grab that. So at the Nombre de Dios, they talk about Bernardo Segui, who built the house that became the St. Augustine Historical Society Research Library. A church warden who originally owned the property where those items were found, buried them to protect them from confiscation by the United States. Another theory is that they were stolen and hastily buried by the thief. However they ended up in the ground, they were never retrieved. I mean, some guy bought them, now was it 14 steps? I can't remember. All we do know is that when an inventory was undertaken in 1827, they were missing. So why they were never dug up is another one of those fun continuing mysteries. But we all know here in St. Augustine, anytime you stuck a shovel in the ground, you're going to find something historical. So where are they now? Another exciting slide. The 7 items, so there were a total of 7 items dug up on the Keith property. We know nothing about whether they were carefully wrapped and placed in a box by Mr. C. or in a bag and tossed into a hastily dug hole and buried. It must have been a pretty deep hole if nobody found it after all that time. What we do know is that in keeping with the times, they were taken to Boston. The Keiths were from Boston, and they would come down here in summertime and head up, wintertime and head up north. So they took them back to Boston and loaned them to the Boston Museum of Fine Arts. And eventually, after they passed away, one of their descendants donated them to the museum. They remained in storage, and this is the key part that kills me. They've just been in storage all this time. You can see them on the Boston website, but they weren't available. But several years ago, Erica Johnson, who was the head of the Marie de Dio's mission, negotiated with the Boston Museum of Fine Arts, and some of the pieces returned to St. Augustine and were placed on display at the Missions Museum. Unfortunately, only 4 of the buried items are on display. So here's and unfortunately, they weren't the 2 real pieces. They're still sitting in storage. So here we go, chalice and the paten. Ciborium, a paten, and another chalice. Actually, there's 5 items. If you get a chance to go, it's a real tiny museum. It's probably about the size of the building here. But they have some very interesting material, including the remains of Pedro Menendez's first coffin. Sorry, I'm not big on coffins, but it's there, it's cool. Okay. So now we're going to talk about outsider art. It's another term for folk art. It's, basically, outsider art is made by self-taught individuals who are untrained, untutored in the traditional arts, with typically little or no contact with the conventions of the art world. So they don't have some teacher going, no, you got to put a little color in that. So here's another definition. So, 1, artist uses very unconventional materials, untutored in the traditional arts, they do it themselves, and outside the established art scene. So I'll be talking about another artist in my St. Augustine stories. But if you get a chance, if you've ever gone to the Hyatt C.C. Brown Art Gallery down at Daytona, if you have a chance to go, because they're going to be closing, I think sometime in March for 2 years while they build a new building that connects all 3 buildings. But they're doing a show called Ship Show. And I have to be real careful pronouncing it. You say that too fast, too quick, it goes back. But they have a piece that was done by Antonio Vivaldi, who was a caddy in St. Augustine. And I remember I was just going through the exhibit, and I go, wait. And he did his work on brown paper cardboard from the local stores and house paint. So very typical of an outsider artist, a folk artist. Okay, so let's talk about, there we go. This man is Alfred B. Smith. I call him a black folk artist who worked into the unusual medium of fish scales. Definitely unconventional, not something taught about in the art school. We know very little about him. The majority of the information comes from newspaper articles in 1903, when I'll tell you a little bit about that. We do know he was born in Georgia in 1866. We know he was in St. Johns County in 1886. A marriage license shows him marrying a Louise Apina in that year. He next shows up in the 1900 census, and he was a widower living on Charlotte Street, 256 Charlotte Street, if I'm not mistaken. And at that time, he was working as a plasterer and a mason. His sister-in-law was living with him as well as his 2 children. His chosen medium was the use of fish scales in art. Certainly a different Okay, so this is the black drumfish. For you fishermen, you know they're found here in Florida. Usually found in the inland waterways and creeks. They're usually caught during the winter months. They're noted for their large scales. Here's an example of a fish scale I found. It's well over an inch or more. The website where I found this image said they could use as guitar picks. Kind of cool. So, okay, so Mr. Smith came to prominence in 1903 when he announced he was building a shed on land north of the Historical Society building. Now, this is the first Historical Society building. It was at the corner of Treasury, Bay Street, now Avenida Menendez. And it went up in flames in the 1914 fire. But I'm assuming that this is where he set up his shed. The building on the left was the old Dr. Vedder's Museum, which was purchased and run by the Historical Society after Dr. Vedder's death. Mr. Smith's shed would exhibit 3 fish scale houses, as well as other oddities, including the skeleton of a sperm whale, a sunfish, which are pretty big puppies, and a gigantic horseshoe crab. Okay, so the St. Augustine record in 1903 said that everyone knows Albert Smith, a colored genius, who was perhaps alone as an architect who builds houses out of fish scales. I think that's pretty safe to say. Here he is shown in 1903 with the half-size home he was building. According to the newspaper, it is 15 by 18 and is 2 stories high. The 2 gable ends are reproductions of the city gate, and that's these right here. Let's see, the house has 8 double sash windows with stained windows, glass, and 2 doors. The ornamental cornices under the eaves are made of drumfish and shark bones. One question in my mind was, it's not fishy. He immersed his scales in a homemade solution to clean them and to make them impervious to the weather. He then squared them using another homemade machine and nailed them to the house. An article in, not the St. Augustine record, but another newspaper that I found, said he needed 9 barrels of drumfish scales, or 3 million plus separate scales, and 16,000 drum sacrifice themselves to give him this. Better man than I am. So a closer look, the article says that he made multiple houses. So I'm presuming that these 2 houses up top were houses that he originally built. And then he stacked them on top of the other house to make it another house that he could do. We don't know who the people are up top there. He had 2 daughters. He didn't have a son, so I'm not sure. Okay, so here's another piece. So once again, there's the whole picture. The picture on the left, so let's just show this. There's a picture here, another picture there. I've tried blowing them up, but the picture is too imprecise. I think that might be an image of a building or maybe some person, I don't know. So what you see around the building are various bones, possibly from sharks or whales. Because as you can see here, these look like the vertebrae from a pretty big critter. And here he has, it looks like stars, but he has other material in there. So he really was quite an interesting individual. I don't think my wife would appreciate it if I came home with 9 drums of fish. So, in one of the articles, they talked about Smith said that the houses were held together with pegs. They had canvas on the inside for walls that had scenes painted on them. So they were built to be easily dismantled and moved. He hoped to take them all across Europe. Whether he did or not, I don't know. But a St. Louis banker who traveled through St. Augustine saw the display, and he contracted with Smith to display the fish scale house at the St. Louis World's Fair in 1904. And it also said that whatever money was gotten would be split between the banker and Mr. Smith. And probably it was in the sideshow section of the fair. It would have been in the main section. So one of my little tasks is to contact where the records of the St. Louis World Fair are, and see if they have any other further information. I'd be real curious to see if you made it. An article in the St. Louis newspaper also states that shark and whalebone would be used to create furniture for the structure. The pillows and mattresses on the bed would be stuffed with bass skins, which had processed to make them soft as butter. I have to congratulate this guy. When you go onto a thing, he really won the call. So let's take a look at this picture. So this is an image off one of those. And that kind of looks like a church. And guess what? Mr. Smith made this image of the cathedral covered in fish scales. This was located in North Carolina. And I think through some folks at the National Guard, I think the article in the file said that it was donated to the Historical Society, and until recently it's been an exhibit at the Lightner Museum. I think Charles, who knows all and sees all, Charles Tingley that is, he says he remembers it being about 2 feet by 3 feet. I recently stopped.
Curiosity room.
Pardon?
It's on the first floor on the curiosity room.
Still, when did you see that last?
I work there, so it's
So it's still there. Because I stopped in and they said, sure, want to buy a ticket, you can go look for it. Thanks, guys. But somebody said they looked and they couldn't find it, so I guess I'll have to go over there. Now I gotta pay for it. I'll go and take a look. That's good. I was afraid that they had dashed away some. Okay, good. So Mr. Smith, I'm continuing to research Mr. Smith. How did he do in St. Louis? I wish I knew. In the 1904 city directory, he is listed as living in a house on Charlotte Street. Once again, 256 Charlotte Street. And I know one of the articles said that when they were tearing the house down, David Nolan warned that they would find drumfish skins. He does not appear in the records again until 1918, when he is listed as living on Kings Ferry Way and working as a laborer. My research on Mr. Smith will continue, and hopefully we'll find more stars in the future. One of the problems is, with a name like Nawrocki, it's pretty easy to find. Alfred B. Smith, there's a lot, but I'm looking through the various censuses, and he doesn't show up. So, unfortunately, particularly with African Americans, a lot of times there's what's called archival silence. We don't find information about it. So we're just going to have to work a little harder to find out some good stuff. Okay. The remains of the Sunnyside Hotel. So, one thing to understand is that at one time, until Henry Flagler, we're just north of where the Ponce was the Maria Sanchez Creek. Came all the way up to St. All the way up to King Street, went out as a marsh all the way out to almost Orange Street. So, and then when Henry came to town and wanted to build his hotels, he had Dr. Anderson. who lived in this wonderful house, to buy property for the use of his thing, but I'm getting ahead of myself. This house came about when Anderson sold his property on the edge of the Maria Sanchez Creek, which is just north of King Street, to a gentleman by the name of Thomas F. House. He was from Vermont, was a captain in the Civil War for a couple of years, and then moved on to other activities. Here is a drawing of the house by E.A. Meyer, who we really liked because he took a lot of photographs of town. Charles and I argue about this photograph, this picture. Charles says it's the Ball Mansion in Myers, put it in the wrong place. I found other parts where it says it started out as a house and then got built as a boarding house. So it's another one of those enduring mysteries to deal with. I tend to believe Mr. Myers, since he was there at the time. So we'll figure it out one of these days. House had moved to St. Augustine and set himself up as a builder in the city. While working at St. Augustine, he built, in addition to the Sunnyside, he built Lorillard Villa, the Customs House, the Spear Mansion, and the Anadown Mansion. So he was not building tiny little houses, he was building big stuff. It appears that not long after building Sunnyside, he added onto it, and it became a boarding house. So here we have a picture. So you can see, this is, it's a tough picture, but you can see here, here's a bulkhead that Dr. Anderson had built to keep the water of the Maria Sanchez Creek from flooding his orange grove. Originally, Anderson had orange groves going all the way out to the San Sebastian River. So, Sylvia Sunshine, I just love that name, AKA Abby Brooks, who was involved with the Historical Society at one time, wrote in Petals from Sunny Climes, Sunnyside has taken a front seat for first-class accommodations with all of its patrons. And you can get a room there for $2.50 a day. Here's another picture. This is a drawing which is a little nicer than what you really saw. And definitely that road was not that large in front of it. But Thomas House died in 1884 in Saratoga, New York, leaving his wife, the Sunnyside, to run. She didn't like it much. So when Henry Flagler decided to build his new hotel, he had his friend Dr. Anderson purchase the land from Mrs. House, as well as the Ball estate. So he bought a lot of property. Rather than tear the Sunnyside down, he moved it across the street to where the Casa Monica now stands, and sold it to Franklin W. Smith, Villa Zoreda, to run as the Villa del Sol boarding house. After Smith decided to build his hotel complete with Flagler, the building was again moved. Smith broke it up into 4 pieces and spread it around West Augustine. I'm amazed they were just moving things all over the place. So this is a picture of, as you can see, that's the main part of the building. I know this was probably on West King Street. I don't know where. It was called Ponce de Leon Hall. And it's the largest and the most recognizable pieces of the building. It was finally torn down. It just really deteriorated. You can see it's not been painted in a while. Of the 4 pieces, and we'll see about this, 1 piece remains of this building. So here's a view from the driveway of the rear end of the hall, pretty dilapidated shape. And for those of you who go on West King Street, and just before the Boys and Girls Club, see this building here. So if you move back, let's just bounce back a couple shots. That's one of these 2 buildings here. Kind of cool. So this is a 155-year-old survivor. So tip your hat every time you go past it. I mean, it's really kind of cool that it got moved there. Okay. Let me move forward here. I think it's a great example of reuse and rehabilitation. It's neat that they painted in Victoria colors. You have to see my way in one of these days.
What street is this on?
West King Street, just before you get to that second, yeah. It's on the, my directions are terrible, south side of the street. Oh man, I'm directionally challenged. Okay. Now, to the great part, potatoes. Potatoes, Hastings, Florida's capital. Potato capital. So if you go to 07, you go through Hastings, and then you run into the interestingly named Bull's Pit Farm. You know, you miss that apostrophe, it's all over. He used to make good potato chips. I wish I saved one of the bags. But anyway, this, anybody got one?
And they double pepper with it.
Yes.
My wife can do those, I can't. But anyway, this is a tractor trailer which is painted with "Welcome to Hastings, Florida's potato capital." Unfortunately, like parts of Hastings, it's weathered and faded, though new life is coming back into town. You know, we tend to drive through places like Hastings, and we don't glimpse what they were, because times have changed, people have moved on, and it's always exciting to know when there's a renaissance going on. And my last trip is to Hastings to see some paintings. I was just like, dang, things are improving. So I took some pictures, so we'll see those. So this is a promotional booklet for Hastings. In 1910, the town shipped out 175,000 barrels of potatoes, each barrel weighing 165 pounds. That's a lot of potatoes. So they were worth at that time $500,000, or about $17 million in today's money. So here's a picture of Hastings. It's a bustling town, and it was built, and it's called the Irish Potato City. In the early parts of the late parts of the 1800s, early parts of the 1900s, white potatoes were called Irish potatoes. You know, they didn't get into this whole part of russet, this and that. Peruvian purple potatoes. You had white, you had yellow. So here's a picture of the Hastings Hotel. It's hard to believe Hastings would have been able to support a hotel like that. And a view of the train station and hotel. So we'll see where that was. So here's a long line of cars waiting to be filled with potatoes. Now this is later after barrels went out of use and they were constantly being filled up with these huge bags of potatoes. And here they are sorting potatoes. Here's some of the workers in the field. Here they are harvesting the potatoes. And here's another picture. I can't even imagine all of those freight cars, all filled with potatoes. Though it's interesting, Charles was telling me that out where the sheriff's office is now, Wise had built a potato chip plant. Just to be closer to the potatoes. How neat. So this is that scene today. It's called Railroad Park. No remains. Here's the train station. It was moved several blocks. It was turned into a house. It became I think they were using it for children. Not to store children, I'm sorry. Daycare. You know, retired people, we don't remember crap for a while, sorry. See if I ever get invited again. So here's the Potato Growers Exchange back in the 1940s. I really want to get into all of their records are stored at the Historical Society. I'd like to get into them sometime. And here it is today. For the longest time, it was just an abandoned building. And now it's been rehabbed, reused. I mean, luckily they kept the potato growers and the Hastings Agricultural Corporation, but it's now a school. Okay, so back up. So, in town there was an old Ford dealership. And I remember back in 2011, right, they had an exhibit of some Beanie Bacchus pictures, which were in a doctor's office above the dealership. And luckily, when I knew about the Renaissance going on about in there, I said, well, I'll see if I can get invited to see them. And it turns out that that old Ford dealership building is being turned into an event venue. The old Civic building next door, which has been abandoned for a long time, is going to be a civic center. It's going to be a library. Lots of good things. There's a lot of stuff. Some new restaurants have opened up in there. But on the second story of the Ford dealership was the home to a doctor and a dentist office. And in between, in the waiting room, the space was used as a waiting room. And evidently, Beanie Bacchus painted a number of murals on the wall as decorative wainscoting. And these are two of the murals. I know when I was speaking, I forget the lady's name, but she does have documentation from one of Beanie Bacchus's relatives saying that yes, he was in Hastings and he did paint them. I want to get down to Fort Pierce to take a look at the Beanie Bacchus Museum. But this is kind of, so this is Flamingos. As you can see the decorations painted on the bottom of that. Okay, rock one, there we go. And this painting. So there are about 4 or 5, but I only chose to show you 2 of those. I spoke to the owners. They're gathering material to do a historical display of the doctor's and dentist's office, and hopefully to put all of the Beanie Bacchus on display. One of the problems is between 2011 and 2025, the roof was leaking, humidity, a lot of people weren't taking care of the building. So these poor paintings, I mean, they're still beautiful, but they could use some restoration, and hopefully they'll be able to do the restoration at some time in the future. But I'm just amazed they survived 50, 60, 70 years, and they're still doing it. So good. Well, that's the end. Do you have any questions? Any questions? Yes, ma'am.
This is a big question, just information.
Okay.
Potatoes, from Irish potatoes, was it particular kind of potato that they grew, making potato chips? Did not have good shelf life,
Right.
and it was hard to transport it. And so they stopped growing them. So it's now they call it heirloom potato, and it's only 3 places that sell that. My partner happens to love those potatoes. She can't find them anywhere.
I don't dare leave my wife for a potato chip back. Anything else? Yes, ma'am.
Before I started making notes, and before I asked my question, could you say what museum you should go to see in Daytona and what to see there?
Okay, it's the CC and Hyatt Brown Art Gallery. You go down, I usually go down Route 1, turn right on Nova Road, and you'll see this big, beautiful building. That Hyatt and Brown collected art.
And what's there?
Well, what's there is they do an exhibition called The Ship Show.
Oh, that's right.
And I pronounced that properly. And there's a number of paintings there of St. Augustine. But like I said, there was Mr. Antonio Vivaldi's piece of art.
Okay. So, I have 2 questions.
Okay.
One is,
This is Stump Bob.
and everyone will be interested to so it's okay. When, you know, I've noticed from my own pictures, old pictures that you can barely see, you put it on the computer. When you go up close to the house of the scales, can you actually see those scales?
I've been able, yeah, I've blown them up and I've been able to see.
Yes, okay. And the man, oh, the woman who made the hats for the horses and the man that runs the map store across from the Facio house, it was his mother, the man I see
No,
when I go.
no. It was a man named Jerry Berry who was a photographer. He had a place on Avonlea Street. He died probably in the 1960s. So, yeah.
But it doesn't have anything to do with the current
No,
map.
no.
Okay, thank you. I'm
Yes,
sorry,
you're welcome.
I'm sorry, I only have 2 questions.
Oh, that's fine. I don't get paid by the question, so it's okay. Anything else? Yes, ma'am.
You mentioned when you talked about the relics that were found, they would notice they were missing. Who noticed they were missing?
The Catholic Church took an inventory in 1827,
Okay.
and then they started going, we're missing a few items. Yeah, 'cause during that whole transition between 1819 really and 1827, they had to figure out went from Spanish to English and the whole change of priests and everything else like that. And they said, well, we need to check and see what's going on. Okay. Well, thank you very much, folks.
Funny that you mentioned that. And that like they're finally acknowledged that they have. Okay, here's the funny Yeah, you just said that. Yeah. And I didn't realize how like significant and unique.
Yes.
How much effort that would.
They're not a small fish.
No.
Their scales are like.
To try to even. Yeah.
It's a steeply and high ground. If you just go to the museum,
Okay, so this is the other building.
Basically, it's like the old building's here, the art gallery's here, and we're going to join around the building in the center.
So it wasn't really.
Maybe they just had
I just wanted to thank you for the enjoyable evening.
Well, good, I'm very glad you enjoyed it, so thank you.
I'm sorry, he's not in the state.
Okay.
But there's a whole lot of.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Now, I'm just a peasant nowadays. I have to go in and ask, can I come in? Ring the doorbell.
We lock the doors when we see it coming. We don't know.
Yes, it's like every time I ring the doorbell to come in, Shelby will go, Shelby goes, okay. It's always like 2 or 3 minutes.
Well, you were saying that someday you're gonna go back out to
No, I want to do some more research on it.
Head out to that. Have a good night. It's good to see you. I did.
Well, I want to do some more research. I'd like to do a whole for a long time, there was no there there. After that, but there's one more I had a little record center. They're historical society. Here's the little here, and our historical society. In fact, there's some other histories about history and other materials that we have. Stuff out. Real much. Let me know. I'll see if I can find anything.
Can you give me a hug before I leave again?
Yeah.
Did you start?